that is the foundation finally done. You see, fireplace is all sealed up. Of course the fire is all still in there, like I just said. It'll all need to be disconnected, the plumbing will need taken out, but the fire itself will stay in there. But that's all filled. I've made a mark here of where the chimney goes up when I was able to see up the chimney. So as I break into this here to take the flue later on, I'll get a very liquid mix of concrete, and I'll pour some of that down the chimney so that it will fill all of the heat exchanger and so on in the fire itself. So up to about here it will be completely solid concrete. And there's pretty big voids back in here that have been packed with concrete. I was ramming it in and it took ages. But now this entire chimney breast, by the time I'm finished, will be solid concrete up to here, because you can see it's cracking here and it's cracking here. Now that might just be in the plaster, but I don't know. So yeah, I wasn't messing about. I wasn't taking any chances with this because it's one of the main structural parts of the house itself. I didn't want to risk anything with this chimney. So we've come up with a workaround that should work. Now the other thing I did yesterday was I laid a very low wall all the way around the edge. Then it jogs in slightly here, but all the way around. And that will contain the next step, and that's what I'm doing today. So I'm going to get a little perlite, I'm going to mix that with clay slip just to stabilise it to just the right mix, and then I'm going to pack that in pretty much up to that level. And I'm only going to come up to that as far as here, because this is where the bench is going to go, which isn't going in just yet. I need to do a little bit of work here. It'll be easier to do. Oh, the quail making all sorts of noise. Yeah, so I'm going to bring the perlite out about as far as here. It really won't damage it any from being in two steps. And that then means I can start going on building the combustion unit and the heat riser. And that's very cool. So I'm hoping to get onto that today, but we'll see how I get on with the perlite first. Yeah, very cool, because with the combustion unit in place and the heat riser built, then I can build the manifold, and really at that point, with the manifold in place, I can fit the ducting coming out from here all the way around, back up. I can put the vertical in, I can go straight to the chimney breast. Now I don't know, there might be another piece of ducting that I need to buy, but it's expensive stuff. I didn't want to buy it unnecessarily, but I might well have to get another 90-degree piece. If I do, it'll just slow me up a couple of days while it arrives. Because obviously living where we do, a lot of stuff has to, well, everything like that has to come in from quite a way away with the post. And at that point, even without the mass built, because I'll be using really good seals on all the ducting, I could actually run the thing, and that is key, because we're getting pretty cool now. We're down to about 3 to 6 degrees at night, and obviously I've sealed that up, and half of the bits that came off it are in the garden. So at this point I've committed to the mass heater for this winter, which is simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. So right, I'm going to get on with this perlite. So I dug some clay soil out of the ground. This is subsoil. It's virtually completely solid clay. There's not much silt in it. It's pretty good stuff. So I put a shovel or two of that in the cement mixer, which makes a huge amount of noise. There's a certain amount of stone in it, and it makes huge amounts of sound. We mix it. I add water from the hose pipe until it starts liquefying, and once it starts splashing out, I know there's plenty of liquid in there. So what I do then is I tip the cement mixer through a little bit at a time through the screen into the bucket, and you can see all the stones get stuck in the screen, and what comes out is this beautiful stuff. It's like liquid chocolate. When the bucket gets full, I run that bucket, pour it again through the same screen into the bucket. You can see what I'm building up there, and that's actually thicker than I need it for this. And when the bucket gets full, I dump it into this wheelie bin here, which I've just scrubbed clean so there's nothing unpleasant in it. It's not a horrible job. It's easier to do this when it's raining and the shower's coming through than it is when you're using, cement-based mortars. So yeah, I'm going to keep going with this basically until I've gone through all of this subsoil and I've got as much clay slip as I can. Now this, let me show you, is pretty thick stuff. So if I put that on my fingers, you can see that really sticks. It's amazing stuff. So that's actually slightly thicker than I need it. So what I can do is I can water this down with a bit more water and get it to the exact consistency that I want for adding to the perlite. But the perlite, really, I think I'm going to have to do inside because the wind's up and I've got perlite everywhere. And I've only got, what, 300 litres, I think? 3,000? I don't know, a load. So, yeah, I'm going to keep going with that until we're good to go. Hey! So this is the insulation that we're putting underneath the firebox. It's clay stabilised perlite, so it's the clay slip that I produced yesterday, and it's watered down to the point that it'll just about cover your fingerprints so you can't see it. So it's fairly watery, but you know, it's easy on that basis to you know, get it to the right consistency. Then that's added to perlite, you know, the white fluffy stuff that you get from, you know, for making potting mixes and stuff in the garden, and it's mixed together until a lump of it compressed together holds its own weight, but when you press it, crumples. That's what we're after, or pops apart even better. But yeah, so you don't want to put too much in, you don't want too little. So I'm putting that on and I'm just spreading it out to get it nice and level. I'm not tamping it down, we want the air spaces in there, but yeah, it's coming together. This is about a bag and a third, so that's what, about 130 odd litres, 135 litres. It's, you know, it goes a fair way. We've got a bit more of it. I think I'll have to order some more before I've done this job. But yeah, that's the insulation layer going down. So that's the base pad for the burn unit in. That was stressful. The insulation in all over the internet, I kept reading you need, you know, 4 inches of clay perlite insulation, including on websites that I actually, you know, consider to be, you know, accurate. But it turns out that when I eventually found the right section in the book again, being this book, it's 2 inches of clay stabilised perlite needed for insulation underneath, and that really, you know, dropped it down another 2 inches, and that's key for what we're doing, as well as saving a lot of perlite. So yeah, I've dug all that out down to 2 inches, about 2.5 inches, nice flat and level. I got the bricks into place. That was difficult because you put them onto the uncompacted perlite, but you know, levelled, and then you tap down the high bricks and you go around, and I was chasing the level all over because you got it level in that direction and then it was, you know, on the twist that way, so you tap these bits down, and yeah, I chased it all over. But now finally, it took about an hour and a half maybe, which I suppose isn't too bad, and got it all flat and level. But at that point I realised that the higher section of lip that I'd put along here was maybe, I don't know, 1/2 inch to 1 inch of insulation between these bricks and that, and of course that, it would have been the concrete, and that of course was contacting the ends of the stubs of the beams. So yeah, we would have had incredibly hot temperatures from the firebox transmitting through, you know, transferring through that little lip of cement and across, and that would cause a problem. We'd have had, you know, possible fires and all sorts. And the same thing was true to a lesser degree, but down this side. So what I've done is, with all the pads that are in place, very, very carefully, I chiselled it out. It was relatively fresh, so it came up. There was a nice shear plane between the 2 pores. So I've pulled the little lip out completely from this direction. All of this now is tamped perlite that goes up against the wall that already existed, and I put a slight ramp on it just so it's still nicely compacted. The next job will be to come in with a little tiny bit of concrete mortar and put a little tiny lip all the way around it just to hold all these bricks in place. I've given a very minimal tamp around it just to, you know, settle it slightly so I'm not going to have any settling. And this section here and down the edge there is going to be very little, but it will still work, and it will still give me that separation between the base pad, which will get incredibly hot, and, you know, the cement that's attached to it, of course, and the wood beyond it. And because that'll be a minimal one, I'll get some more of this rock wool that came up from under here anyway when I lifted the boards up for, you know, putting the foundation in. I'll jam some more of that down between as well, so it'll be, you know, double insulated, and yeah, that'll make a big difference. So yeah, that was a lot more stressful than I anticipated, but it's down and it's flat and it's level and it's square. So with that little cement border in place, then I'm into starting to actually lay fire brick and starting to build the firebox itself. So with the base for the burn unit in and all surrounded, I've laid out the brick as indicated in the book, and I've run into one issue. Now, this is an amazing book. I wouldn't recommend that you try to build one of these without buying this book. It's fantastic, but most of it is about building an 8-inch system, and this, you know, with 8-inch ducting. This is a smaller one for various reasons. We've gone with a 6-inch system, which is the other fairly conventional rocket mass system, and there's a lot less detail in terms of you know, laying out a 6-inch system than an 8-inch system, which causes a few minor issues. But the problem is actually one of mine. Normally, all the instructions in this are for full fire brick, which is this size, and a split brick, which is just half as thick, and it's like a standardized fire brick that they use for the examples in the book. And I don't know where they're, well, I'm pretty sure that I've ordered the wrong ones, basically, because I ordered what I thought I was ordering, split brick, and you can see that's less than half the thickness. So a normal split brick should be 1 1/4 inches thick. This is just an inch thick. So the proportions of bricks and how they stack up doesn't work with this example. But there are principles to be borne in mind. You could build one of these to, you know, as long as it's wide enough to get your hand down into for cleaning, you could make one of these in virtually any size with certain modifications. It doesn't have to be nice round numbers like 6 and 8 inches, just that's the size the ducts come in usually. So one of the problems I've encountered is because there's a split brick on its side and then a full brick on edge to bring us up to what would be the normal height, except of course I'm 1/4 of an inch too low because this level here isn't high enough. Now that causes a problem because the cross-sectional area through the burn, down the feed tube, through the burn tunnel and up the riser, and then we ignore the area around the bell, around the drum. But as it goes down through the manifold and through the ducting, again, it's the same cross-sectional area of that 6-inch duct as there is through the masonry channel through this whole section. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that this is 6-inch, because you've got the difference between the cross-sectional area of a 6-inch duct is not 6 inches on all sides through a square opening. It's different. And because this is made for the American market, this book, it's all in imperial, so that breaks down as 5 1/4 by 5 3/4 inches, which, you know, normally works, and I was quite happy working to that, absolutely fine. But because I can't get the height on it, it means I've had to widen it slightly to get that cross-sectional area. So at that point, I've abandoned imperial and I've gone straight to metric. It's just easier, I think better in metric. Now, a 6-inch duct is 150 millimeters, 15 centimeters. And the way that breaks down is because this brick, you know, this section of tunnel down in there is exactly 14 centimeters high. I've had to spread it slightly to the sides, and this now becomes a 16 centimeter opening. Now the trouble with that is that we also need a 14 by 16 centimeter opening coming up here through the burn feed, and also up through the riser. You know, there has to be a completely identical cross-sectional area through the whole system. And that means, of course, that this section here has to be a slightly different dimension as well. But I've been very lucky in that normally it takes, what's that, 3, 4, 5 full fire bricks to create the bridge through, you know, down through the burn tunnel. But I'm very lucky in that all I had to do is swap out one of the full-size bricks for 2 of the not quite split bricks, the ones that are an inch thick, and it actually turns out absolutely perfect. So the layout here now is I've got an opening that's 14 centimeters by 16 centimeters, and exactly the same here. That's 14 centimeters and 16 centimeters, and that's the exact same proportion that'll come up as we go up. So that's the difficult bit. Once I got this section in, I'll be going with another one here, because what we worry about is the interior dimensions. We don't care what's happening on the outside. So a little bit of overhang like this really doesn't matter at all. I could trim them off if I wanted to be pretty, but it doesn't matter. And then the next one will go there, You see all that lines up quite nicely, but I've got to make a cut brick here, and I'll have to do another one here, which will be, you know, the opposite, so that we're staggering the joins like you would building a brick wall. And with that in place, I can put the next one on. Another problem I've encountered is theoretically, fire brick is dimensionally completely perfect. They should be square, they should be exactly the same, and these aren't. There are slight variations. If I put two of them next to each other on a perfectly flat surface, one of them will sometimes stick up by as much as a millimetre, which when you're talking something like this really counts, because they should be able to stack and that'll be it. So it does cause issues. Now normally you can get away with, instead of using like a mortar like a cement, using fire clay slip, which is just fire clay that's mixed in water to make a very thin slurry that's just at the thickness that if you dip your finger into it, it just fills in your fingerprints. So that's perfect, you know. And it's really quite thin, and it's just there as more of a liquid shim than anything else. So as we stack the bricks, it, you know, fills in all the gaps and behaves quite nicely, but it's not like a glue. So the difficulty with that is, compared to a brick wall, you can just tap down, it squeezes a bit out the sides, and you've got, you know, everything flat and level. It won't necessarily be with this, so that's something I've got to bear in mind. I'm going to use it just as clay slip and build it up to this kind of level here, and these ones on as well with the ones that are being cut, and then I'll see what sort of level I'm dealing with. If there's any irregularities, then at this point, because of course this is going to come all the way up to 4 feet, you know, it's a big riser, and it's only built with, well, once we get up one more level, it's only built with these on edge. You know, it doesn't give you a great deal to work with in terms of stability. So what I might have to do is on the bottom just mix a little bit of sand in with the clay slip, just to create something that's a little bit thicker, so I got a little bit of levelling compound, and I might have to set up slightly between courses, but we'll see how that goes. It might be okay. The issues I've seen have been with the bigger bricks. It's possible that the thinner ones are more perfect, in which case I'll only have instability in the bottom course, but you know, that I need to address. But we'll see. I just don't know. But yeah, it's very easy to say, and I put this thing together and everything was smooth and everything was perfect. No, I've never built one of these before. I'm not a builder, so I'm showing it warts and all, including, you know, any issues I encounter. If this is the worst thing I encounter through this build, I'll consider myself quite lucky. But yeah, it is working your way through something from a book is a little bit of, you know, crisis management, hitting one issue after another and, you know, working out how it goes. But yeah, so now I need to take all of this apart, and then I've marked it out on the inside vaguely, and I'll get the first course of bricks, which is, you know, the split bricks, down, get that completely perfect and measure it all out using the clay slip, and then I'll put this course on top, then I'll put this course back on, measure everything again, make sure everything's right, and then I think I'll switch to making the 2 cut bricks that I need, because once I've come up one more course here, because it's a 6-inch system, there's quite a bit of overhang where the split bricks come up, so you can see that's quite a bit sticking beyond the burn toe. So if I then put the next one on here, well, the next one's going to come kind of here, so even there's overhang. So all of these are going to be cut down to size, which will give me some, you know, end bits that I'm sure I'll use in some project or other, but it will mean that when I come to put the insulation around the around the riser, because all this will be insulated before we're finished, but as I come to do the insulation, it'll be a much neater job, and it'll give me a lot more space through the you know, around the riser as the gases drop down into the manifold. So it'll just give me a lot more room to work with. But yeah, so that's what I'm on to next. So I've just gone to lay the first few bricks, and I've noticed that see that black little bump there? That is literally a bump. That is a good 1/3 of a millimetre above the surface. That's enough to create enough instability to cause rocking. So hopefully that's all it is a couple of them. I come across another one here that's got the tiniest little imperfection that again will cause problems. Now these will be fine in the riser, because as long as nothing's butting up against that bit, it won't be a problem, because it'll be cut, or it could just go to the outside, not a problem. So I'm going to keep them and use them for that, but I'm hoping that's what the problem's going to be. Fire brick before it's laid needs wetting, so I've sprayed this lot down with just a basic sprayer, and now I'm about to lay the first brick, which I've been looking forward to and dreading at the same time. So Right, I'm going to get which one of the splits, which looks nice and smooth. Now I've measured, I've laid down here basically the place that it needs to go. Everything from that flows quite nicely, but the first one has to go the right way. So I'll need to dip the brick into water just to get it good and wet, and then the entire bottom face is going to be sticking down on it. So I'm going to dip that into the clay slip which I've got in this bucket. Oh, that's fine. And then that is going to be dropped there. That's the first brick in place. So far so good. Oh, no, it's not a full size brick. Oh, I see. That edge is now butting up against that, so as well as doing the underside, I also need to dip that side. Yeah. And then I'm going to continue all the way around until I've got this bottom course in and really measured across to make sure that it's, you know, exactly the right 160 millimeters, and then I'll lay the second course up like it was when I did the dry fit earlier. There's a bit more done on the core. The feed tube is up to the height that it is going to be. There's a split brick is going to go on the top, and there'll be about 5 to 10 mil of a slight lip around it just for that to sit on, but that'll all be embedded in the cob that comes around it. I've started building the riser. With even the slightly thinner bricks that I've got means that it makes a really nice thin riser, but it's really scary to build with. You know, I mean, it's 25 mil across 1 inch thick. It's not easy, but you know, so far so good. What I did find when it came time, I mean, if you're doing an 8-inch system, you can leave the stubs sticking out. They're only going to come out a little ways all the way around, so you know, it shouldn't make too much of a difference. If you're going for a 6-inch riser like this, then yeah, I wouldn't suggest that. I'd suggest that you get a proper brick cutter and actually cut them off, because it makes it such, you know, so much shorter, and it'll mean insulating it later comes easier. I did discover when it came to cutting these bricks though, theoretically with these things you can use it with an angle grinder and just a cutter and just go nice and slow. I'd say no. If you're doing the volume of this, it's probably going to be it is going to be much easier to get a proper, like a tile cutter. I've kept the safety guards off it and I can just put bricks through, but also these bricks are rough, and because they're going on a metal surface there's a lot of friction on there, so if you're trying to get a smooth cut through the machine it's very difficult. So what I did is I've just cut sheets of plastic, and this is just the damp proof course, this is the offcuts from what went under the foundation, and just a little bit of that for the brick to sit on, and it glides a lot more easy through the machine. You have to stop and wipe it down every 3 or 4 cuts, because you know, the grit builds up underneath it, and again the friction becomes a problem, but that's been a game changer. That was really useful. The next step now is what I have found when it came time for doing this. The slip I was using is fairly thin and watery, and also I found that there's too much grit in it. So this is the fire clay that I've bought. Now what I've been doing for like a sealant for, you know, filling little tiny cracks and stuff, is I put some of that through a sieve, and then I use the finer stuff to make this more like a putty. This is a bit drier than it was, but this is much better. It's a much cleaner thing. There's no bits of grit in it. I can get a much, if you've got bits of grit and you're trying to get an engineered brick to sit perfectly true, then that can give you enough to throw the level off, which is a problem. So I'm going to make basically this kind of slip here, which I've been using all along, but even just doing that, I can feel the grit in it. So I'll do that with, in fact I'll do it now. Get my bucket, that one. Okay. Fire clay into the sieve, and then I just sieve it in. You can see all the really coarse stuff stays in the sieve. I mean, it's, a fair bit of course. This isn't, a really, really, fine mesh thing. It's just a standard kitchen sieve. So I'm going to do a fair bit more of that and use that finer product to make the slip for putting up the remaining 6 courses. Because 6 courses of this to bring us up to 48 inches, that's scary. I mean, yeah, but it's going to have to happen. And the other thing I've done today is I've started putting some plaster onto this. Now, it's really nice working with just the clay and the earthen masonries that are going into this. I'm a total convert, but I couldn't get that to bond onto this because it'd be a dissimilar material, so I've had to go with multi-finish standard plaster, which I'm a terrible plasterer, but it's going to look better than what's there. So I'm only coming down to about as far as here because all this is going to be cobbed in to about here anyway. I've got a bit more to do on it, but yeah, just explain away that's a different colour. Now, the other thing with working with the earthen masonries is if you make a mistake, it's so easy to recover from it. At the last time I built the core partially, I was happy with it, I finished for the day, I went to bed for the night, and the next morning when I came out here and started lining things up, things didn't make sense. So it should be 140mm by 160mm, and I made the openings in the core 160 by 160, but through the burn section here it's 140 by 160. So yeah, I'd have had a dissimilar sized core which wouldn't have run at all well. So I'm glad I noticed when I did. I'd only come up a couple of courses, and it would have caused problems. This would have smoked back, it wouldn't have been a good mass heater. So I'm glad I noticed when I did, but because of the nature of just using the clay slip and it was still a bit moist, I was able to just disassemble it really easily. There was no hammering involved, no chiseling, I didn't lose any materials at all. I just remeasured everything as it should have been, wetted the clay down and just put it all back together again with a bit more slip. Really easy. It's easy to take it apart and put it back together again, and that's the real perk of using these earthen materials, including fire clay. It's been absolutely brilliant. So I'm going to continue using that as much as possible in future. So yeah, it's just got to build that. But before I do that, I've got all these bricks here, and there's a lot. 6 courses need cutting, and that's a lot of cutting, so I'm not going to film that, that's not interesting. But I'll do a bit more filming I think when I've got the riser finished. So that is the core finished. That's up to 48 inches down inside there, 16 inches down inside there, and from that edge to the interior edge in the bottom there is 23.5 inches. So that is the core completed. Next I need to insulate it and do the manifold, but yeah, I'm going to give that a little bit of time just to dry and set up a bit so I don't give it a bump when I'm putting the insulation on it. But yeah, that's the next step done.